embalmed this evening. So I'm hoping I can read this and not be kind of, whatever, halting as I am speaking, because I don't know how well I'm going to be able to see it, but I'll try it one way or the other. Okay, in these two short animated films, Lauren Kelley has given us an impetus to discuss themes of love and desire, craving and disappointment, food and food and food. The two pieces share imagery and narratives of food, and the stories they tell, while quite different, were rendered by Lauren in meticulous detail, every aspect chosen with focused attention, from the use of singer Arthur Prysock as a voiceover, to the feast spread before us and the flies in true falsetto, and to the cake frosting quality of the dresses and the shrink wrap and cellophane packaging in frou-frou conclusions. While Dr. Michael and I have not talked at any length about what each of us would say this evening, I do have the sense that he will speak to a psychoanalytic understanding of responses to unrequited love. And I'm glad to give that complex and sad part of the picture to him. And I will try to open the space for us to consider desire and craving. I'll preface my comments on each of the two animations with references to what Lauren Kelley said at the opening here on December 1st, giving her space here this evening even though she can't be present in the gallery. Lauren told those at the opening that she situates her work historically as a response to the women's movement and the art world of the 1970s, and said that she views these pieces and others of hers as social interventions. The most clear and manifest references in her self-introduction were to the 1970s pop duo, the Carpenters, the sister and brother pair viewed as a bridge to adult music, that is, music like Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra, for the young adults of the time who had trouble relating to or wanted something in addition to rock and roll, the Beatles, etc. For those of us of my generation, yes, there were people who felt they needed something more. Lauren said she felt seduced over and over again by Karen Carpenter's voice. My recollection of that voice was that it was distinctive for its chest register quality. She sang down here as well as here. My hasty research into her informed me that she could sing 3 octaves, and the lowest notes were quite impressively almost baritone, not so unlike the found sound voiceover for true falsetto by Arthur Prysock, another late 60s and early 70s vocal phenom whose work was baldly seductive, like, quote, the folds of your dress falling into the hollows of your thighs seductive. And again, an alternative listening choice for young adults not totally consumed by rock and roll. Lauren's perspective is that Karen Carpenter, not a falsetto, although her voice was falsely masculine to some ears, like male falsetto voices are feminine to some listeners, embodied, and I choose that word with intention, a loss of innocence. In brief, the biography is that Karen had been a chubby little girl, and at 5 feet 4 inches, 17 years old, in the beginning of her recording career, she was appalled to weigh 145 pounds and began a slide into anorexia that ended in her death due to heart failure in early February of 1983, 30 years ago, a month short of her 33rd birthday. Less publicized was her brother Richard's addiction to Quaaludes, also known as Quaaludes. The latter perhaps because it jived even less well with their innocent, squeaky clean image, which paradoxically was a large part of the Carpenter's seductiveness. So in true falsetto, a piece Lauren relates to Karen Carpenter, the eating disordered image of innocence, we have Arthur Prysock, the Barry White of his day, suave and a bit sleazy, to use a word that Lauren used, narrating the failed picnic. Lauren renders the scene as meticulously as the seductive male picnic maker planned his. They both supply all that anyone might desire, multiple courses, the full gamut of colors and scents and textures, and we as viewers are drawn in as fully as was the intent for the beloved, and what became the reality, good and bad, for the flies. Online, Lauren says about true falsetto, quote, an invisible and earnest protagonist leads viewers through an account of the preparations made in anticipation of the most marvelous date that never occurs, which is where we will speak to things, I think. In the spirit of psychoanalytic exploration, that is the spirit of free association, an appreciation that there is other than rational understanding, that letting one's mind wander in the service of finding non-linear but meaning-laden connections can lead to powerful truths. I will bring in some poetry that True Falsetto called to mind for me. Y'all will recognize this, I'm sure. The Spider and the Fly, from 1829. Will you walk into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. 'Tis the prettiest little parlor that ever you did spy. The way into my parlor is up a winding stair, and I've many curious things to show when you are there. Oh, no, no, said the little fly, to ask me is in vain, for who goes up your winding stair can ne'er come down again. The best of renderings of the worst consequences of seduction, right? So, to further inhabit my position as an analyst, the short film, Like a Dream, is telling a story about an internal experience or dilemma or conflict. Freud said wishes were central to dreams, and in my opinion, that is certainly true of this dream film. My association to the fly being seduced into the parlor, never to return, suggests one interpretation. The spider narrator baiting the web for his lady love, who never comes, as well as inadvertently, perhaps, for the flies, who come in droves, and at least one of which is intoxicated by all it consumes. From this perspective, the drunken fly is a stand-in for the beloved, who might have been seduced had she come. But perhaps I'm not alone in this. When I first viewed the piece, I experienced the narrator-protagonist as being represented by the fly. That is, I heard the voice and thought it's that fly singing or talking this strange song or whatever. Maybe other people didn't see it that way, but that's what I first saw. The fly was the first creature on the scene, there from the get-go, overseeing all that the picnic had to offer. From this alternative, non-linear, perhaps even closer to free associative perspective, the drunken fly, who slide through some dark and viscous fluid, coincides with a pause in the narration and preludes Prysock's realization that the lover would not be arriving, is the layer of the feast trap. That is, he laid the feast trap, so consumed by his own seductive desires, his own wishes to attract and hold the lover in the web of food, that he loses track of reality, eats to his heart content, satiates himself into a stupor from which he has to pull himself in order to know and acknowledge that the lover did not come. In True Falsetto, I think it is all too easy to think of the sleazy beer commercial voice of Prysock. That's what he did after he did these songs about, material between women's thighs. As an almost lascivious or villainous character, potentially oozing his way into his chosen partner's prey's arms, plying and prying her with forbidden fruits and vegetables and cheese and wine, etc. But I believe the paradox, and if this were a dream presented to me by an analysand or someone in psychotherapy, the crux of the matter, the pivot that demonstrates the unconscious, is the moment when his active laying of the web clearly collapses. Then the seductive narrator, the one whose desire is to evoke desire, to become the object of desire by filling another's every desire, is painfully thwarted, his activity interrupted, his despair apparent. So who is seducer and who is seduced? The picnic layer has become so possessed by, intoxicated with, imaginings of his potential lover that he is as much prey, as much seduced as she might have been had she been foolish enough to enter the picnic web. The psychoanalytic perspective requires that we always keep in mind the dynamics played out in relationships, including those invoked in the patient-analyst dyad, may well not be what they seem to be. Who determines the loving, the lover or the beloved? Moving on. My first response to frou-frou conclusions was also a common phrase. quote, all dressed up and no place to go. According to Lauren's self-introduction, this piece started from a different place. She was interested in tactility. Further, online she said, quote, hungry subjects and viewers are teased in an attempt to scrutinize the notion of needing, wanting, losing, getting more than what one already has, end quote. In contrast to the sumptuous track behind true falsetto, in this piece there is no sound, the story told by pictures and subtitles, which I found clumsy and terse and visually masculine, in stark contrast to the layered and ultra-feminine pastels and posturings. Truthfully, I found the spelling and grammar errors in the subtitles amusingly consistent with the theme of seeking unattainable perfection and finding woefully omnipresent imperfection. I think this piece might offer us a bit more about craving and about nightmares than about desire. There is no psychoanalytic definition of craving per se, but I venture that it is closer to addiction than to desire, that it is both more intense, specific, and urgent, like craving a chocolate or a cigarette, and that frustrating a craving results in a more heightened emotional response, one of more anxiety, perhaps even bordering on panic. Where am I going to get my next fix? Whereas a frustrated desire may lead to the not less intense but less jagged, more disappointed or sad feeling. Those features of craving, however, don't necessarily tell us more. Indeed, in some way they may ask, what is really absent? Perhaps that's it. Craving is more about the experience of what's missing, more a need than a wish. A craving is more literal, whereas desire is more imbued with a story, with fantasy, with imagining, with creativity. Related to this specificity and concreteness, I believe cravings may have a greater potential for shame, as if they tell something flawed or defected, something missing about the craver. In the case of the frou-frou conclusions women, although they were all deemed winners, they all felt like losers, different from at the picnic, where everyone loses and sad night falls on all, the flies still swarming. Frou-frou characters, mouths quivering, Botox-shaped faces collapsing, dress collars sagging, all need to repair or augment or complete themselves, to reinstate their frou-frou state that they had cultivated with months of deprivation. And all are shamed of that need, of that craving. They don't remain a sad or disappointed collective, though. Rather, they try to buck up, and the remainder of the piece focuses on the response of a single winner-loser trying to lick her wounds. Of course, the most telling images are just those post-pageant images of the gowned shopper passing by, passing up the most nutritious foods, and especially that of the protagonist's beauty pageant competitor with the big bag of potato chips, open no less, hidden under her skirt, near her thighs and most intimate parts, so that the world would continue to see only what she had polished to present, and the shameful, not in good taste part of her, her craving, would remain hidden. We've all heard that phrase, quote, if I eat that, it will go straight to my thighs, right? The whole trip to the supermarket is a faulty attempt to undo the deprivation and to free herself, an attempt doomed to failure because she continued to hide it out of shame and because the self-imposed deprivation created craving that in turn motivated self-destructive, shame-ridden behavior. This is more the stuff of nightmare than the first piece. What a terrifying position Miss Frou-Frou finds herself in. On the brink of being found out, her shameful wish about to be uncovered, her masquerade of perfection ended, her true and flawed and hungry self exposed. What other ending could there be for high-calorie, pastel, cake frosting, frou-frou conclusion? So I believe Lauren Kelley has given us more than food images in these two films. She has given us food for thought. And she's done more than and different from the social intervention that she stated is a motivation in all her work. She's opened up a world of psychological possibilities and potential psychoanalytic interpretations. Now, Dr. Michael will tell us what his analytic lens sees in and through Lauren's work.
thank you, Gemma. And, we had hoped and assumed that our views would be very different.
Right.
I think there's a lot of overlap.
Oh, is that right?
Maybe all psychoanalysts think alike.
Right, exactly.
But I
We're all
hope to
of
get
one
it.
mind.
So I'm going to share my thoughts of this one psychoanalyst viewing of Lauren Kelley's charming and imaginative video installation. What I will offer is simply one lens through which to view her take on the potent and universal human themes portrayed in her work. Among the problems that psychoanalysis attempts to explore about the human condition are the ways each of us comes to terms with the challenging predicament that we face as we are a mind living inside a body. How do we develop a mind which mediates the relentless needs and cravings of our bodies and reconciles those with our equally compelling need for love and acceptance? I think that both of Ms. Kelley's works deal with love. Each within its own metaphor portrays longings and hopes to win love through heroic efforts and graphically depicts rejection, the agony of unrequited love and its psychological consequences. Disappointment in love is universally experienced as traumatic. When we seek love, we offer ourself, or at least a version or a construction of ourself, and if this presentation is met with rejection or indifference, we suffer a narcissistic crisis. Our self-love is injured, and some sort of reparation is needed. In the wake of this assault, we invoke self-protective mechanisms in an effort to restore our injured self-esteem and our illusion of control over our fate. One such mechanism we may employ as a kind of face-saving maneuver is object substitution. So, for example, a frustration in the interpersonal realm over which we feel we are not in control leads us to take refuge in sources of gratification over which we feel a greater degree of control. Disappointment or frustration in the realm of love and passion can be the source of artistic inspiration. Indeed, it has fueled the writing of wonderful poetry, literature, the creation of countless works of music, and wonderful painting. Van Gogh's hopeless love for his cousin inspired spectacular works. Psychoanalysts call this turning of one source of instinctual energy away from its original aim and object towards a different purpose and object, often a creative one, sublimation. And it is one way of explaining the passion and fervor found in many works of art, even, for example, in religious art. However, many forms of object substitution are less creative and adaptive or progressive, but may represent a more regressive retreat to an earlier developmental stage. For example, in the face of failure or frustration in sexual or romantic pursuits, we not infrequently retreat to a developmentally earlier and safer sources of comfort and sensual satisfaction, especially those associated with our first and most dependable love, that of the mother, who once offered an unconditionally accepting and loving response, symbolically and physically embodied in feeding. Hence, we often revert to food and self-feeding as solace in times of rejection, and thereby give love to ourselves, a more dependable love. Food being a love object we can more reliably control than we can another human being. It's not
Water.
It's not uncommon for food to become fetishized. As a fetish, it can be imbued with all the passion, sexual longing, and gratification experienced in a sexual relationship. One need only observe the passionately sensual descriptions of wine or food by gourmets and wenophiles, or observe ads in commercials for food to realize that what is being stimulated is more than simply a hunger for flavorful nutrition, but sexual appetites are being addressed as well. I've recently become a fan of the PBS show The Splendid Table. See, there are others. And although I've never seen a picture of Lynn Rossetto Casper, just listening to her voice as she describes the ingredients and recipes and the physical act of food preparation and the tastes and textures of the food she's preparing, I've come to feel that she has one of the sexiest female voices on the planet. Similarly, it was hard not to be aware of the erotic metaphors as I watched the luscious images and listened to the resonant voice on the soundtrack of True Falsetto, describing the picnic preparations for the most wonderful date in the world that never happened. I was struck by the dreamlike colors and pulsating images and the almost tangible, sensual quality of the food. The foreplay of appetizers, the syrup dripping down the pancakes, all so perfect and tempting. The flies caressing luscious chocolate, sliding down the toothpick poles to the receptive waiting cheese below. And eagerly probing and entering the vaginal folds of the flower petals. Listening to the protagonist narrator's voice, he appears to be addressing an absent woman. However, it is the food and his description of it which appears to be the object of his passion. As it is caressed and fondled by him verbally, by our eyes, and by the insatiably rapturous, blissfully sated flies, the food in the picnic spread has become a fetish, a substitute object of desire, over which the protagonist has complete control, as his masterful, over-the-top preparations demonstrate. It has become idealized as a lover might be. But in this, his created banquet, he has provided everything. Nothing is left to chance. Every appetite is satisfied. No want is unfulfilled. There's nothing left to be desired. In this fantasy, he has conquered desire. Throughout, the flies attest to this through their ravenous consumption and rapturous satisfaction. I put some tongue twisters here. But in the end, the man is alone, and there is something ultimately unfulfilling in his solipsistic creation. He has created everything but a lover, over which he has no control, and who does not show up, despite his preparations, and waiting one day for every hour. The picnic meal is perfect, like an ideal lover, but the idealized lover doesn't show up. Perhaps she doesn't even exist. Perhaps the entire tableau is a creation of his imagination, a mirage arising out of his yearning and hunger for love, created as a perfect ideal substitute for absent love. The imagery of the flies is ironic. You should ponder that. The man has created the banquet for a lover, presumably a beautiful woman. However, the only takers are the flies, not generally thought of as beautiful or welcome guests at a picnic. Flies are psychologically primitive creatures. They are very oral. They are always hungry, and they will eat anything. Are they a representation of the man who is desperately hungry for love and is feeding on his own fantasy in what is his solitary, ultimately futile exercise in self-deception? Still, in the monologue, there is a sense of loss and frustration. All this sacrifice, all this effort to create a love nest yields only disappointment and frustration. As the scene ends, the fly seems to be pulled away from its gluttonous merger with the surface of the coffee. And the man goes into the night searching for his absent lover. There is a masochistic quality of self-sacrifice here, of going to the nth degree, yet still being unappreciated and rejected. Is there an unconscious fantasy operating in this man of self-sacrifice and humiliation as a necessary price to be paid for love? Or is being in love with the idea of love and the idealization of self-sacrifice? The wonderful pun of the title, True Falsetto, speaks to this idea of illusion, of reversal. It suggests, and the video shows, that a thing isn't really what it seems. Just as the deep baritone voice of Arthur Prysock is far from falsetto, we are left with the questions of what is true and what is illusory in the realms of desire, self-sacrifice, love, and loss. Ms. Kelley's second piece, Frou-Frou Conclusions, is also about love and efforts to obtain it, but despite the title, it too ends inconclusively. This piece employs the metaphor of a beauty contest, and all the sacrifice, self-denial, discomfort, and postponement of gratification required of the contestants in the hope of winning the contest and being the chosen one, loved by all the judges and cheering spectators. Through their quivering bodies and forced smiles, we feel the pain of the contestants' dieting, of toes forced into tight-fitting shoes, the discomfort of being confined in heavy taffeta dresses under hot lights. The contestants wear their denied hunger in the form of sugar frosting dresses, which look good enough to eat, but torturous to wear. They stand for hours under the hot lights on stage. But this story too culminates in a falsehood, a trick, an illusion. All are declared winners. A lie, which means in fact that all have lost and that all their efforts have been in vain. The underdog protagonist, having lost hope of love and approval, seeks comfort in oral gratification. She has been thwarted in her Oedipal stage girlish exhibitionism, failing to win the attention and approval of the father judges. She's humiliated, and in an effort to assuage her pain and swallow her hurt and anger, she regresses to the maternal love object, seeking oral comfort. Rebounding from her failure to achieve satisfaction and love through self-denial, she indulges in an orgy of buying and presumably planning to binge on junk food for dinner. In her shopping spree, she denies herself nothing. Every conceivable shape and color of cake and confection goes into her shopping cart. The love junkie, failing to win love, settles for a more reliable object of desire, junk food. But she feels conflicted about this self-indulgence, as she must hide a stolen bag of chips from under her dress. She is angry and feels entitled to more than what she craves. More than what she craves. She craves more than what she can allow herself to express. But she must hide her protest under a sugary exterior, the cake frosting taffeta dress, which she shows to the world along with her waxen smile.
So do we have any questions or any comments?
A free association.
Right. Anyone hungry?
Maybe you all saw some different or some distinctions between desire and craving. That was kind of what we thought we might talk about.
Did most people get a chance to see the films? No?
Oh, no.
You really should, yeah. We tried to bring them to life.
Yeah, right, right, yeah. Right.
For those who haven't, they're really short. Does anybody turn on?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think if people have it,
Yeah.
They're just a few minutes each.
Yeah, they're like,
Shut your mouth. Yeah.
it's an embarrassment of riches, you can see either one or both. This is the one with sound, right?
No, this is,
yeah.
and it's also in the middle, but
There is a little sound.
Wow. I would hear that guy's voice after this.
Oh my
His
gosh.
voice is big.
It's sleep.
Right, right. And he did go on to make beer commercials. It's kind
Did he have funny?
we joke about, since Hostess has gone bankrupt,
Yeah.
almost every one of these treats are named by Hostess.
All right. Is the sound?